everybody, welcome back. It's Amie. Today I'm going to be reviewing everything that I read in June, July, and August. Reason being that I did not read a lot in June and July because I think I mentioned this in a previous video, but my mom was here. And so I was going back and forth to see her, and I was really quite busy. I trying to spend quality time with her. So I didn't get to read a lot. And then August, I got to read quite a few books, not as many as I typically would, but then I've been occupied with so many things lately, and that has affected just how much I'm able to concentrate. I'm the kind of person where if there's a lot going on in my personal life, it kind of affects my concentration. I wouldn't say that I have the best attention span. I never have. Even as a child, when I would get report cards back from school, it would always be something that was highlighted that I struggled to concentrate in school. I did pretty well, but I probably could have done a lot better had I got that under control. I feel like I'm slightly better as an adult, but I could be wrong. But I am that kind of person where whenever anything is going on, whenever I feel overwhelmed, I tend to, my attention span and my ability to focus on one thing at a time falters. And I'm extremely jealous of anybody that can read in chaos because I just can't. And it's the same reason why I can only read one book at a time because for some reason, balancing multiple books, it doesn't compute in my brain. I can only do one at a time. And if it gets to a point where I'm reading a book and now feel the need to read another one, I just DNF because after picking up another book, especially if I like it, I think it's highly unlikely that I would like the one that I was previously reading. And if I liked it, I would have just continued reading it to the end. Also, I'm currently recording this on the 28th of August, and I'm currently reading Oathbound by Tracy Dion, which is the third book in the Legendborn Cycle series. The reason why I've chosen to include every book that I finished in August with this video is because of the lack of books that I read in June and July, but also because I don't think that I'm going to finish Oathbound in 4 days. So I'm thinking, why don't I just do the 3 months and then I'll review Oathbound as part of September's reading wrap up. Hopefully that does make sense. But I am tackling that TBR, so I'm very happy about that. Without further ado, let's get into it. So, the only book that I read in June was Love in Tuscany, which is a series of short stories by Maya Jean, Hannah Henry, and JJ Mulder. The reason why I found this book is if you follow me on this channel, you'd know that I'm a very big fan of JJ Mulder. And so I had been looking to see if she had written anything I hadn't read, which eventually led me to this book. It's part of an ensemble of 3 authors, and they've written a bunch of short stories about 6 different people who all attended a wedding and had various different roles. So the couple in this book that are getting married, their names are Olivia and Bailey. And so every character in this book is a guest at their wedding in some way, shape, or form, or just somebody who's working at the wedding. So the first story is Just a Fling, and it's by Maya Jean, and it follows Olivia's half or stepbrother. I can't remember. His name is Tate, and he's a doctor, and he's recently divorced, and so he's a workaholic, and he doesn't have very much of a personal life, but he and Olivia are very close. And so he's in Tuscany to attend his sister's wedding. And so he meets Sully, who is a teammate of Bailey. I can't remember what Bailey plays. It's either hockey or football. He's an athlete. And Sully is his best friend slash teammate. Sully is in the final stages of his career. He knows that he's going to retire soon, and he'd like to find somebody to have a family with, somebody who he can settle down with. And so they plan to just have a fling. They meet, and then there's sort of instant attraction between them. But the more that they spend time together, the more that an emotional bond forms between them, and they start to fall in love and start to consider a future in which they're more than just sex partners. I really love this one. This was my favorite book. I hadn't read a book by Maya Jean before, but of all 3 of them, I believe this was my favorite. I just loved the way that the relationship formed between them. I loved how intense but also gentle and sweet. It felt like a story about 2 grown men, obviously at 2 different stages of their lives, who are just looking for that really special relationship and just looking to settle down. And I love the pacing of it. I feel like there was a good amount of lust, but also the emotional bond that started forming between them. Because of the way that the story was, just a fling, you would assume that it would just be packed full of sex scenes, but it wasn't. It was very split between showing that emotional bond that started forming, them getting to know each other, them having deeper conversations about their likes and dislikes likes, sharing their insecurities, them sharing worries about what a future might look like between them. Because the thing about Tate is that he's a workaholic and he's a surgeon. And so I think a big part of the reason why his marriage failed was because he was unable to balance being a surgeon with being married. And if I remember correctly, there might have been unfaithfulness. So it was a matter of him feeling guilty for not having put that effort, but also being completely heartbroken. And then he has Sully, who is just so giving and loving and outwardly sweet and creates this safe place to land for him. And I really love this story because of it. NFL football. Sorry, pardon me, I'm not American and I am not an avid sports watcher, but I just remembered it's an NFL story, so that's football. Forgive my ignorance, but I really love this one. So it's just two strangers who meet and happen to fall in love there at the wedding. And also I loved the setting of them being in a villa, and it just felt very romantic, them being in a villa, them going out and exploring, and then the food chat, because I feel like you can't really write about Tuscany and not talk about all the pasta and the pizza. It felt very romantic, very warm, very, I don't know, it just felt really good. And the next story is by JJ Mulder, and I think it's Italy, not love. It's about this American guy called Roman and this Finnish guy called Nilo, who is working at the wedding as a waiter. So Roman is a guest. I believe he is a friend of Olivia's, if not her best friend. And Milo is working the bar as a waiter. Nilo is traveling around. He's a bit of a nomad in the sense that he just travels around. He backpacks a lot and he's just trying to get as much of travel into his life as he can. So obviously he will work an odd job here or there to make money to sustain him, and then he will travel from place to place. And then Roman is just here for the wedding, but he's also a bit of an introvert. He doesn't have that many friends. And I think, if I remember correctly, he also works a lot from home. So he doesn't get the opportunity to meet people. So despite craving that intimate relationship with someone, he doesn't have very many opportunities and is a bit hesitant to put himself out there like that. And so they meet by chance. It was very sightseeing focused. And it was nice because I think this book provided the opportunity to almost sightsee through their eyes. It almost felt like a tour guide slash romance, if you know what I mean. So that's what I really appreciated about this one. This one was my second favorite. This one would be 3 stars. It was good, but ultimately forgettable, which I didn't really expect from JJ Mulder. I don't think there was anything particularly special, though I did enjoy it for what it was. And then the third book was Snapshots by Hannah Henry, and this featured Nash and Rory, who are photographers and are working at the wedding as photographers. So Nash has a photography business with Rory's brother. But Rory's brother ends up being unable to meet the wedding, and so he sends Rory in his place so that they're able to fulfill their end of the contract and photograph the wedding and everything. So they had slept together a while back and they had a bit of miscommunication. They both wanted more, but didn't actually communicate that to each other. So they were left feeling not used, obviously, because they both consented to what happened. But there was something that happened that made Nash think that Rory wasn't interested, and it just hurt his feelings and he never brought it up. So it was this big elephant in the room. Obviously, with them working on the wedding, gave them an opportunity to talk and clear the air. This one was also good. I'd give this one maybe also a 3 star. It was okay, but it didn't really make that much of an impact on me. I can't really think of anything in particular about it that stood out to me. So this was my least favorite, even though it was still quite good as well. They're all between 3 and 3.5 star. It's very hard to get an extremely good sort of novella short story, because I don't know if it's just me and I'm not a writer, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like it takes extra sort of work to make a short story completely unforgettable. But I did enjoy all 3 stories for what it was. I thought it was nice. I thought it was a good escape. So if you're looking for something that you can digest easily, it's obviously based in the real world, but because of that destination wedding element, it kind of takes it out of everyday life. So I feel like it was perfect for me in that moment when I was just looking for an escape, but wasn't necessarily looking for fantasy or looking to delve into a new world where I have to read into a lot of world building. It was the perfect escape while still being grounded in reality, if you know what I mean. I would give this series probably 3 stars as a whole, 3.5 on a good day, nothing more than that. I think it was good for what it was, but at the end of the day, I don't think it made that much of an impact on me. The only book that I read in July was One Touch Past by JJ Mulder, which was a very anticipated read for me. It was between Nate and Marcos. So if you've read the other books in the series, Marcos is Max's best friend and Nate is Max's teammate. So Nate plays hockey with Max. This book, in many ways, kind of disappointed me, but I still liked it. And I did expect it to rank higher, but I did find that I got exhausted at some point and stopped reading because there was something about the flow of it that wasn't as good as previous books. That said, I really loved this book because I've been very curious about Marcos because in book two, which featured Max's story, he and Max had gone through something extremely traumatic. Max more so. Max physically went through it, but he was sort of collateral damage in the sense that he's carrying guilt of not having been there to stop it from happening. And so I think this book does a good job exploring what that guilt looks like, especially for somebody like Marcus, who really takes on people's burdens. He's extremely empathetic. The trauma of that event has manifested in him being extremely closed off, extremely panicky. He's constantly checking Max's location to see where he is and if he's safe and if he's okay, which kind of leads to him neglecting himself a little bit. And then he's also struggling with touch. So I think great in terms of realizing how sort of trauma manifests itself, not only mentally, because you could feel the burden he was carrying through his words, but also physically, and how that, because it's hard to know how things affect people. And so I'm grateful that a book like this that looks into the effects of trauma on somebody exists. And Nate was lovely. Nate is a ray of sunshine. He is extremely accommodating. He's such a light and he's so warm and he just makes everybody around him so happy, so loved, so seen. He also has a best friend called Mickey, who's also very shy and has been through some things on his own. And he goes out of his way to make sure that Mickey feels seen and loved. In many ways, they were both standout characters because I felt for Marcos in the way that he took on people's burdens, and even though he came across as quite gruff and grumpy, you realize that he's not under that tough exterior. He's such an emotional, soft person. And Nate is just so full of warmth and he was so accommodating to Marcos. And he, honestly, with Nate, he just wanted to be with Marcos. He's not subtle in any way. He's very forthcoming about what he wants and who he wants. And he was very much the pursuer in this story. He just absolutely loved Marcos and just wanted to be with him. I think where I struggled with the story is they spent a lot of time apart because they were both juggling different things. And so I wish there had been more of a development into their bond and their relationship before they had gone to Nate's family's ranch. I really feel like there was a bit of a gap missing in terms of building that relationship between them. I feel it made sense also because Marcus was avoidance. So, in many ways, I understand why the author would have chosen not to put them physically together. But if that were the case, I would have much preferred if she perhaps made the time that they spent at Nate's family ranch a bit longer and explored their closeness there, if that makes any sense. But it didn't quite flow for me how J.J. Mulder's books have in the past. And I did finish the book not totally being satisfied with it. I feel like sometimes Gigi Mulder struggles with the ending of her books. Sometimes they feel rushed and inconclusive. I've struggled with that in the previous books and also this one. But I think with the previous books, because they found them much more digestible, this one felt a bit of, I don't want to say it was a hard read. It was lovely and I did enjoy it, but there were times that I put it down and I wasn't really interested. It was easy to get into, but there was a middle chunk that I found hard to get over in order to get to the point in which they're together again and they're bonding. So I don't know if that makes sense. This ended up being, I believe, a, what would I give this? I would say between a 3.5 on a bad day and a 4 on a good day. I don't know. I think it's hard for me because I've really been obsessed with J.J. Mulder for a few months now. When you have a favorite author and you're struggling with the fact that you didn't love, not that you don't like, I liked it, that I didn't love something that they've put out, I think that's kind of me. Maybe if I read it again, I would feel differently. But I do remember struggling to get through it, which is a shame. But I'm looking forward to Mickey's book, which is coming out next, I believe, in October. And that one is very intriguing. Now that there's been more information released about the book, I am super interested to see how it fits into this beautiful world that she's created. Also, I want to say that I really enjoyed seeing Max and Marcus heal their relationship. Not that their relationship, it was in a bad place because of what they had been through, but it was nice to see them talk about, it was nice to see Marcus go to therapy, and it was nice to see him take the advice that the therapist had given him on board and really have that tough conversation that he really needed to have with Max to discuss what they had been through. Again, one thing that keeps bringing me back to JJ Mulder is the way that she writes friendships between male characters, because I have never read a book or a book series that frames the friendships between men the way that she does. It is just so sweet to see how they're there for each other, not only physically but emotionally. They have genuinely deep conversations between them. They're always talking about how much their relationships mean to each of them. They're always talking about how much they love each other. I don't think I've ever seen a man tell his friend that he loves him or express it in that way. And that's something about JJ Mold that I always give credit for. The relationships and the bonds that she forms between the men, not just romantically, it actually feels like the friendships are integral to who the men are. And I eat it up every time. I look forward to the relationships and the romance between the guys that she writes about, but I also look forward to those nuggets of friendship between them because they're so sweet and so kind. And I feel like men in general would benefit from bonding with other men in the way that JJ Mulder's men bond. They are seriously so sweet together. I also can't forget to talk about Luke, because Luke made a few cameos in this book as well. He's Max's boyfriend for people that don't know, and he brought with him all his sunny warmth that he brought in his own book, and he was just a joy as usual. Luke and I would say Nate are very similar people. They are both great springboards for both Max and Marcus's just quite serious, more quiet natures. They're both quite loud and gregarious and sunny and warm and forthcoming. So having Luke in this book was lovely. He tortured Marcus in the way that he usually does, which isn't really torture at all, just light teasing. And he bonded well with Nate, and I couldn't ask for more, honestly. Those little cameos between the friends, they always make me so happy, because sometimes I do struggle with cameos in a series, especially in a romance series. I have found myself at times struggling with cameos, especially when they're too much or it feels like they're taking over the story. But every time JJ Mulder has a cameo with her characters, it always feels so sweet and so needed. And it feels like drinking water on a really hot day. That's how it feels to me. So I just love these guys, honestly. They're so sweet with each other. And I will be sad when this particular series ends. And then the next book I read was One Indulgence by Lydia Gastrell. It's a historical romance set in London. I can't remember the time period, but I never really focused on that, anyways. And it's about Henry and Richard. Henry's an L, and Richard is Lord Richard Avery. So they both belong to that upper class sector of society. And then they both meet. Given the time period, they're not out. A lot of people don't know their sexual orientation. And Henry comes to London. He's from the country and somewhere quite remote. And so he comes to London to be able to sleep with a man for one night because he's due to find a wife and get married and fulfill his obligations as an earl so that he can produce an heir and keep the family sort of line going. That's why the book is called One Indulgence, because he's planning to have just one night with a man to hopefully be able to share that connection that he's been missing his entire life. While it was quite popular, obviously, for a lot of men who were attracted to other men to get married and then have affairs, he didn't want that. He's opposed to infidelity. So he was planning just to have this one night with a man and then go and get married and just live his life. Obviously, not having that fulfilling relationship, but fulfilling his duties as a son to his father. So he wasn't planning on having any affairs. So this night was particularly important. And then he meets Richard, who is also attracted to men, also sleeps with men, but he has a circle with a group of men who are also into men. And so they sleep together, they keep each other's secrets, they have an unspoken rule of not revealing anything. And so this book, they meet at a brothel, if you will. And so they spend the night together, and it's amazing for both of them. What I really loved most about this book was the commentary on the socialization of men. because Richard gets to sleep with men and he enjoys that. But the problem is that Richard is a very soft and vulnerable man. While he's been satisfied with his encounters with other men, above all, he's always craved intimacy. He doesn't just want to sleep with people, he wants to feel connected to them. He wants a bit of a softer approach to sleeping with people. And so all his previous partners have made fun of him for how soft he comes across, the fact that he likes to kiss for an extended period of time, and he likes that tender aspect of sleeping with somebody. And he doesn't get that because the men that he knows are into this are usually into a quick thing. They don't want to be emotionally invested, they're just looking for a release and to go about their daily life, and he doesn't want that. He wants softness, he wants a strong connection, he wants intimacy. He wants to worship someone and be worshipped in the process. And so it's something that he's been looking for, something that he's become gradually frustrated by, because one of his friends that he's sleeping with, called Julian in particular, he finds that while Julian fulfills the physical aspect, he does struggle with Julian making fun of him for wanting the more softer aspects of what it feels like to be with somebody in that way intimately. And so he finds Henry just by luck, and he makes the experience really special for Henry because, again, it was Henry's first time doing everything. And so I really like the fact that he got that one time with someone like Richard, who loves that soft aspect, that connection. It was what Henry needed. And so they left the experience feeling quite sad because Richard is like, this is everything that I've ever wanted when it comes to sleeping with a man. But then obviously Henry has obligations and he only intended for this to be one night and one experience. And so they embark on this journey of Richard trying to convince Henry that they should be in a relationship, basically, and that Henry should consider it. It's funny because they're both really opposed to infidelity. So it's not even as if Richard is telling him, fulfill your duties, but also come back to me a few nights a week. Let's do this thing. Let's have a relationship in secret. It's not like that. Richard wants Henry to be fully devoted to him in the way that Henry would be devoted to a wife. But obviously they can't get married and they can't have a public relationship, and there's lots of limitations to what that can look like, but that's what he wants. And Henry finds himself between a rock and a hard place because he likes Richard and he wants to pursue a relationship with Richard because he's finally found all that he'd been looking for his entire life. But then he also has an obligation as the only child of his father to get married and produce an heir. And so they go about trying to figure that out, especially in terms of Richard also introducing his sister to society so that she can get married, because especially in that day and age where women really needed to get married, and his sister was looking for a potential spouse, and his brother knew about him, but his brother hated him for it, and just his brother is quite a terrible person regardless anyways. So they just embark on this journey of trying to figure things out in the midst of everything that they're currently doing and their duties. One of my favorite moments in this book was the conversation that Richard has with his aunt, where his aunt basically tells him that she knows that Richard is gay and explains how she knows. I don't want to spoil it. It's something that you should probably read about, how she's come to her conclusions. And he's very scared that, because he's very close to his aunt and he sees her quite regularly and they have a really nice bond. But I loved when she confronted him about knowing. He was very scared that she wouldn't love him anymore after he basically confirmed it. And she was like, I will always love you, and explain why. And it was just such a lovely moment. When you read about standout moments from a book, that was one of them. I really loved that conversation between Richard and his aunt. I liked Richard because he was a man of contradiction. On the one hand, he was quite arrogant and forceful and very much like your historical romance version of a bad boy, if you will. But he had such a soft center and he was such a hopeless romantic. And when he saw that chance to get it with Henry, he became unstoppable. Henry tried so hard to resist him, but Richard was not letting him be. I really liked how the book concluded as well. The only thing I would say is I just wish we had more time between the two of them on their own. But I do see how that would have been impossible given the story. But it's the only thing that I would change about the book. I just wanted more time with them alone to figure things out, because of the way that the book was structured and the way that their lives were structured, they spent a lot of time either in the company of other people or separate. And so I just wanted more time with just the two of them. But other than that, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I love the commentary on the burden that what men are supposed to be, how it affects them and how it affects other people at large. and I really enjoyed it. It was definitely a highlight for me in the month of August. And I can't believe I had been avoiding this book because I had Kindle Unlimited and I had been avoiding this book for whatever reason. Sometimes my brain does that. And it was that moment where I read it and I was like, so what the hell was I waiting for? It was such a good book and I thoroughly enjoyed it and I should have read it sooner. But I'm glad that I read it at the end. I loved every minute of it. I just wanted a little bit more. Would have made it perfect. Next book I read was One Glimpse, also by Lydia Gastrell, and it's the second book in the series. And this focuses on John and Samuel. Samuel did pop up in the last book. Actually, they both did. So Sam is a friend of Julian's, and Sam and Richard had a little bit of beef. They didn't really like each other very much, and also because of that small circle where the men sleep together, they did have a bit of a contentious relationship. So I was curious about him because we didn't get a lot of insight into why they didn't really like each other very much. And also Sam has a bit of a contentious relationship with Henry. So I was very intrigued by Sam. I wanted to know his story. I wanted to know why he was the way that he was, why he came across as so cantankerous in the other book. And this book gave great insight into it. John was great. They're all in the same kind of society, except I believe Sam is I don't remember what he was. There's levels to the aristocratic shit. But Sam is a lower level. I don't know the title. I'm not really interested in that much. But all I know is that Sam is doesn't have the same title as the other guys, but he's extremely wealthy. And so he's trying to get his sisters married. And then there's also the thing where Sam is not conventionally attractive in the way that books like these describe. He's a little bit chubby, he's a bit shorter, he's a bit more sensitive, he likes to read, he's not really into all these alpha male hobbies, and he just sticks out in his society. And then you have John, who is the embodiment of all those things. He's very attractive. He's very tall. He's into all those hobbies. But at the end of the day, he finds that he's always putting on a performance because that's not the life he wants to lead. He looks the part, but internally, he's not the part. And so he's getting to the point where he's exhausted with how he presents. Basically, he just wants to be himself. And John also has a mistress who is a friend of his that he just really looks after because she's been shunned by society. So if you read the book, you know why. And his little child, and that impression of John doing that, he did it for himself as well because obviously he wanted to create the front that he was a heterosexual man, even though he wasn't. So it was convenient for him to keep this mistress and act like he was desperately in love with her and all those things. But they had a platonic relationship, and he was very much a father to her child and all that stuff. And then Sam really struggled because he is growing up in a world where he's not respected based on his place in society, even though he's quite wealthy, but he's not as upper crust as he could be. He's very much into reading, he likes the arts, he's very emotional. He's the kind of person that would cry at a play. And so he's definitely a target for a lot of bullying by other men. And he had some really bad experiences at boarding school, and he has a very complicated story with Henry in particular. And I just really love the exploration of that because I feel like sometimes with books like these where the main character is not stereotypically attractive, there's almost this tendency to fix it. The way that they look is a problem. And I quite like that that wasn't the case here. Sam found John, and John absolutely loved him because Sam embodied everything that John wanted to be, but hadn't had the courage to before. And so he was very attracted to Sam, not only looks wise, but because Sam possessed the depth of emotion that he had been seeking, that he hadn't found in his social circle before. And so they really embark on this journey of learning each other. I love the fact that Sam's defenses felt very real. He had very unfortunate, happened to him in boarding school, which you'll know if you read it. I don't want to spoil it. And in particular, he held a lot of resentment towards Henry from the previous book because Henry put him in a position that led to him having a very traumatic experience. So he was very bitter and cold, and he presented himself as very bitter and cold and unfeeling because he wanted to hide how vulnerable he really was inside. Did get both sides. I did understand because in books like these you really have to put yourself in the shoes of the other person, and I did understand why Sam was so angry with Henry, even though Henry at the time did what he thought was best given the circumstances and not wanting to be found out about liking men. And it's the kind of book that embodies why the reality of how society treats homosexual people is just so sad, because things could really be different if we were more accepting, if we didn't make them feel like disgusting creatures or criminals. If they didn't have to hide, so much of their pain could have been avoided. It's the kind of avoidable pain really frustrates me and gets to me. And I'm saying this as somebody who's never experienced anything like that. And I think some people may feel he wasn't justified in the way that he went about things, but I think he was entirely justified. The combination of being somebody that's not stereotypically attractive, somebody that is in a circle that's not fully accepting of him, and also somebody who is emotional. It's a triple threat of things that he would be made miserable, even though none of them are sins and none of them are bad. But in the society that he lived in, they were seen as that way, and even till today. So I love the commentary about the cage that hypermasculinity creates for not only men but also women as well. I love the relationship between John and Sam, and I thought it was sweet and I thought it was cute how they managed to break each other's barriers down and just have a really sweet relationship. But I think one of my favorite parts of this book was the resolution between Henry and some people might consider it's cheating in a way, but I didn't think it was because I knew that they didn't really have feelings for each other. And I love the fact that Henry went out of his way to rectify the situation and they talked about it and they explained it. It's very complicated and it's definitely a spoiler, which is why I can't go into it. But I would love to know, if you've read this book, what did you think about the way that they resolved it? Like ending, what did you think about it? Because I absolutely loved it. And this is one of those things that this is why nuance is so important, because without it, it would look really odd. But with context, it makes so much sense to me. Let me know what you thought. What else was I going to say? Oh my God, the whole nickname fiasco. So basically, when Henry and Sam used to be friends, Henry used to call Sam Sammy, and Sam used to call Henry Hen. And so John and Richard discover that when they obviously make up and when Henry steps up to help Sam, who is in a bit of a precarious situation. And it's so funny, their reactions. They were just like Hen and Sammy. They were not having it basically because I think Richard and John are very similar. They're very possessive, they're slightly aggressive, brash. And Henry and Sam are so cute and sweet and gentle. So I love the fact that they both have that sort of dynamic. I loved it. The person that did intrigue me was Julian. And it's sad that there's no book about Julian because he was in a bad state in the book. And I'm just really surprised that the author didn't do anything with regards to Julian. I would love to read a book about Julian's story. I'm intrigued about him and his story and how he'll end up and all those kind of things. But ultimately, I did enjoy both books. I think I did give them both 4.5 stars, which is pretty good, I think. They were great books. They made me feel like I achieved something because after 2 months of hardly reading anything, it was nice to be able to sink my teeth into both of them and actually genuinely enjoy them and go back to them and look at quotes and things. So yeah, I loved both these books and I wish the author wrote more, but I don't think she does it. I don't think she writes anymore, which is quite unfortunate. But yeah. Next up, I concluded the CU Hockey series by Eden Finley. I had read the previous, I believe, 3 books. The first one I read was Line Mates and Study Dates. So this book deals with Asher and Cole. Asher plays hockey. We saw him a little bit in the previous book. So I was very curious about him and why he came across the way he did. And Cole is the hockey coach's son. And so Cole basically lost a bet to his dad and now he has to look after the team. I love this book. I don't know why I'd been avoiding it for so long. In my head, I thought I wouldn't like it, but it actually became my favorite of the series, which is baffling. Asher's parents have passed away. So it was his dad and his stepmother, but his mom previously died when he was little. So he had experienced that tragedy, and then his father gets remarried, and then both his father and his stepmother pass away and leave him and his older brother with their 5 younger siblings. So basically, he's now a parent at quite a young age. I believe he was 21 or 20 or something like that. And now he has to balance grief and playing hockey and school, and he feels like he's failing at everything. He's very good with his siblings, but he's struggling at school. He's not keeping his grades up. His grief is manifesting in being disruptive and not bonding with the team. And in a team sport, it's necessary to bond with your teammates so that you're achieving maximum results. But he's kind of being recalcitrant. And so Cole decides to tutor him to make sure that he is able to keep up the academic side of his life so that he can stay on the team and play hockey. So basically, Cole comes up with ideas to make sure that he's studying and passing. And it was such a cute book. I sometimes struggle with college romance books because I always feel they don't really pack the punch that I like with romance books, and they sometimes feel a bit too juvenile and they're not really that well written. But I really like this one because Asha has had to do a lot of growing up in many ways because he has to step up for his siblings. And Cole is already very naturally responsible. He's an only child and he's studying to become a doctor. And he's also struggling with his dad because his dad is a hockey coach and desperately wanted Cole to be a hockey player. The thing is, Cole has no interest in hockey, but he was very good. So his father is struggling with accepting the fact that he's a hockey coach. His son is very good at hockey, but his son has a different dream than he does. And it's that thing about parents projecting their own expectations on their children only for their children to not have the same goals and the same dreams, and then they're struggling to come to terms with that. And so while Cole was very close with his parents, he did feel his father's disappointment in the choices that he's made. But I loved how deeply rooted he was in the fact that he was not going to play hockey just to please his dad. He loved taking care of people, and so he was going to become a doctor, and that was that. He was very, very self-assured, and I love that about him. It really rubbed off on Asha. I loved their relationship once they started opening up to each other. Asha, I think, was really, really sweet once you got to know him, once the mask of I don't care about anything, came off, especially with his siblings. He was struggling a bit with his brother because he and his brother were going through periods of not really understanding each other, not talking about their grief, not hashing out their issues with each other. He also struggled a lot with comparison, which is very common among siblings. So there was that element because his brother used to play hockey and was a professional hockey player before he had to stop to help look after their siblings. So he struggled with being very much in his brother's shadow. I really love the exploration of the sibling dynamics, the parental dynamics as well, what that looks like when you have to take on the responsibility of being a parent when you didn't actually choose it. It ended up being much deeper than I gave it credit for, I thought it would be. I love when a book can defy expectations like that. I expected it to be one thing and it ended up being the complete opposite. And I think that for me was the most pleasurable part of it, was the fact that it ended up being more than I thought it would be, which is a bit of an indictment on my prejudgment, I suppose. And I would read it again. It was that good. Up until that point, I thought it was the best of the series. And it's actually a shame that I put it on the bench for so long because when I did finally pick it up, I was like, what the hell was I doing? I should have read this a long time ago. And so that's that. And to conclude, I read Puck Drills and Quick Thrills, which was about Astra's brother West and Jasper, who is a professor. He actually made an appearance in the last book because Jasper had a bit of an issue with Asha because Asha wanted extra credit, and Jasper has a very interesting backstory. But he's a maths professor, but he actually struggled back in high school when he was bullied very heavily by hockey players, and he's never really let go of the resentment that he feels towards hockey players as a result. So it then transcends into the way he deals with hockey players and athletes that he teaches because he feels like they're always trying to find the easy way out. They don't put in the effort that they need to stay afloat in terms of academics, and they're always looking for the easy way out. So his childhood insecurities as well as his childhood experiences bleeds through into his adulthood. And then he meets West, who comes to ask him to, because West also is the assistant coach for the hockey team. So he comes to have a discussion to see if he could give Asha some grace, given that they were dealing with the death of their parents. When he was quite harsh with Asha, he didn't know the backstory, and so when he did, it changed his tune a bit. And so he has his 20-year high school reunion coming up, and he doesn't have a date. And there was this thing about like the ugly duckling, which also was in the previous book, about like being the ugly duckling in school and then all of a sudden growing up to be very attractive. And Jasper had grown up to be very attractive, and so he didn't really have a partner, but he wanted to show his previous classmates that he had made it and he was doing well. It's very understandable when you read and you find out what exactly they did to him, because it was very disgusting, honestly. And when you first read the book and you find out the resentment that he has towards hockey players, I know that I did. I felt like it was a bit much, especially for a man that was almost in his 40s. But then I read what they were saying about him and I was like, yeah, you have every right to feel the way that you do. And so he asks Wes to kind of be his fake boyfriend and go with him to the reunion. And then their relationship progresses from there. And it's so beautiful. West is such a fantastic character. Like I said a while back, he has left professional hockey so that he can be like a proper parent to his five siblings. They've all just lost their parents. They're all grieving. And so now he's a coach. So he's still in the hockey world, but now has like a position that allows him to be around more. And I just loved how he embraced this role. It's not easy to all of a sudden be saddled with 5 kids that you didn't bring into the world, but he embraces it. I loved the exploration of being overwhelmed and not knowing what you're doing, but wanting to do the very best for your siblings. I think he had a very realistic portrayal of what that would look like. And he had a few meltdowns, a few breakdowns. I think Jasper was always there for him to break that fall. Jasper, his own end, in had to learn how to let go of the resentment he feels, how to be a bit less insecure, you know. And I think West really helped with that, just to help him see that first of all what he went through was entirely wrong, and then there's nothing wrong with him, and he's perfect the way he is. I think I need to read more male romances between older men, because I tend to enjoy them a lot more than I do like college stories or like early 20s. I quite like it when they're a bit older and they know themselves more. And I think it really helps with an all around really good story. So I really love the book. Slightly less than the previous one, but I loved it all the same. This is probably my second favorite of the series. Again, it kills me that I put it off for so long because I thoroughly enjoyed them. I also love the exploration of Wesley's relationship with Ezra, because Ezra made a pop up in the previous book. And Ezra is a bit of a problem. He is very much a playboy, and he embraces, he's a hockey player, and he's actually Wes's best friend. It made me curious about Ezra, which was really interesting. So yeah, it was overall very enjoyable. I loved the very realistic themes. I loved that at the end I felt like they would go the distance, which I think is what if anybody's looking for in a romance. You want to read a book that you feel as though the couple will last. Otherwise, what's the point? I love the happily ever after. I love the gestures that they made. It was just so realistic in the sense that he has a full-time job. They're not always going to be able to see each other in the way that they want to, but they were both willing to put in the effort to make sure that they were in a functional relationship. And I, last but not least, I forgot to mention, I actually went and read Egotistical Puckboy by Saxon James, because like I said, I was very intrigued by Ezra. So this was Ezra's story with Anta and Hayes. They play on the same team. They're both professional hockey players, and it's their love story. I didn't really feel as emotionally connected to this book, although I really enjoyed it. It's funny because the previous books had the college sort of setting and this one didn't, but this one felt a bit more juvenile in a sense. But I did really like Ezra and Anton's relationship. I loved the power. I love a bit of like a power struggle, power dynamic thing in a relationship, and they very much had it because Ezra is very much a playboy that needs to be kept in line, and Anton very much takes on that role. I really love the dynamic of Anton trying to keep him in line, and also Anton is very like tough presenting, but he also has that really sweet depth of emotion within him. And so I loved this story. I don't know if this series is older or not than the previous, but I just felt this was nice, but didn't pack the same emotional punch that the other ones did. Although it was nice to see somebody make an honest man out of Ezra. It was really, really sweet, and I love their relationship. Also, Ezra struggles with his parents. I love that dynamic of exploring Eastern European sort of relationship dynamics between parents and children, because I see a lot of things online, but I didn't have any personal anecdotes. It's a generalization. I'm sure there are parents that are not like Ezra's father, but it was nice to see that push and pull and the difficulties of Ezra's relationship with his parents that have led to him being the way that he is. That was really nice to see. Also, I don't know how to pronounce Ezra's surname, but I did really like it. I will say that I tried to read Irresponsible Puck Boy, I tried to read Shameless Puck Boy, and I tried to read Stubborn Puck Boy, and I couldn't. I found the three books completely unreadable, and I just didn't like them. And they were very juvenile and very underdeveloped in many ways, and it felt very like smart heavy and not a lot of development, especially with Shameless Puck Boy. That one was by far the worst. That was a DNF. I DNF'd Irresponsible Puck Boy, which is the second one, because I just couldn't get into it. I DNF'd Shameless Puck Boy. I got quite a bit into it, but the story wasn't making any sense. The struggles of the characters wasn't making any sense. It just felt like going round and round in circles and justifying terrible behavior for a backstory that I didn't think was worth all that trouble. And with Stubborn Pork Boy, I just got really tired. So I didn't really take to the series as much as I did, but I did enjoy Ezra and Anton's story because that was fun and that was nice. It was good for what it was, but with the other three, I didn't really enjoy it. And yeah, I didn't really want to pretend otherwise because it just wasn't doing anything for me. Thank you so much for tuning into this video. Thank you guys for your support. Thank you for the likes, the comments, the subscriptions. I really, really appreciate all your time watching my videos. It feels surreal that I've been consistently producing videos for a good amount of time, and I would love to continue doing what I'm doing. I'm also finally posting on TikTok and shorts as well, which feels good for now. And yeah, everything's shaping up nicely. I'm reading Oathbound, so I'm really wanting to tackle my TBR without trying to explore new books. I'm hopefully going to have that plan out really well. So September's TBR should hopefully be really good, and it won't be like this where I've had to combine several TBRs because I couldn't get some reading time. September is a quieter month. So I think I'll definitely be doing that. But thank you so much. Please like, please comment, please subscribe. Please let me know what you think about this video, and I will hopefully see you next time. Bye.